Hi, this is Maria from Teacher School, and I wanted to go over today some of these forms that I just created. This is a little bit different for me, but if you know me, you know I love a form and a to-do list. And ever since I started working in an interventionist capacity, working with students in smaller groups or one-on-one, I've needed to have more systems for keeping track of information. And over the years, I've developed the following systems. So I thought I would turn them into some forms that I could use and then share them with others. It's on my Teachers Pay Teachers store, which I'll link to in the description, and it is called Practical Forms for Busy Teachers. And while they're really here to help you organize and plan, there are also a lot of assessment stuff here, and I think those are my favorite forms. So when I download PDFs like this where you want to write in them that have forms, I use Acrobat from Adobe. And basically what you do is just open the PDF using that application. So you just go to open, find it in your files and open it. And then there's a section over here called Edit PDF in Adobe. And that's clicking on that pulls up all of these options in terms of typing. And putting different fonts and different sizes and all that stuff. And that's what you want to click on in order to type in the way that I'm going to show you. You don't have to type on this form, but that's an option that's available to you if you decide that you want to type out some or all of your notes. Or obviously you could just print things out. I probably, if I was going to use these, would probably print out most things, but I'll show you some of my suggestions for how to use them. So this is the first page, cover page. And then I also included this little painting I did just as a binder cover if you're interested. And then here's just some suggestions on how to use them overall. I suggest that you experiment and make the forms your own. If a category doesn't work for you, feel free to cross it out. Put in your own category. And obviously you can either use them as printed versions, as digital versions, which I'll show you as I type it in, what that looks like, or you could do both. So first one is pretty basic. It's just class birthdays, and I've actually put in some birthdays as an example. You could print this out for yourself. You could put this up in the classroom. Usually classrooms have bigger signs than this, but if you're maybe a middle school teacher, or if you want to do birthdays for other people in your classroom community, like teachers, other teachers, staff, things like that, that might be a good option. I created this class at a glance, and it's basically this blank set of squares. There's lots of ways that you could use this, and my primary way for using it is I just put in the kids, all like my students' names, and then print out a bunch throughout the year and use it for different things. So I could track participation, I could track allergies, I could track a bunch of different things with all of my students. And I also have a second sheet for this in case you have more than 16 kids in your class. Okay, the next sheet is for groups and tables, and groups and tables is a huge part of being a teacher. So many groups, so many tables. And I just wanted to show you how I typed these up, but obviously you can just print this out and handwrite it. Also, I advise that you keep track of these and maybe even keep a file of the groups that you've had in the past and even write notes about what works and what doesn't work, which is why Ron and Harry are in different groups, because they don't work well in a group together. All right, so here is the year at a glance. It's a little bit laid out like the birthday chart, except it starts in July. And the idea is that sometimes you have to track curriculum across months or units across months, or even think about things in terms of quarters. Just there's lots of things that go across the year, and it's helpful to have something at a glance. You could also put holidays in here. I didn't do that, but what I did was I wrote about how Unit 1, I wanted to focus on subtraction. Maybe last year they needed more subtraction support. And Unit 2, start the problem of the week, and then a kind of note to myself to test students before break. So this is a way to organize throughout the year. This is a monthly to-do list. This will come, like I said, this will come blank, but I put some of these items in just to give you an idea of some things that you might do every month and need to keep track of. So for example, under the clean and organize category, I might type in pencil bin, markers, glue sticks. Cleaning and organizing those, I might change and or replace, that's this category here, the hall bulletin board, pencils, library book display, calendar, morning meeting. So basically with this, these are the things that you do every month, and it helps to have it printed out or written out. So then that way next month, you're not scrambling to remember everything you need to do monthly. Here on this side, I have some things for like things that need to be scheduled, things that need to be prepped, things that need to be ordered, like paper towels, Kleenex. That's really great if you have to do that every month and remember it, or just occasionally. Checking first aid kit and student journals are usually things you have to do every month. These are just suggestions. You certainly don't need to do what I've written down, but the idea is that that's how you might use this sheet. So just like I have a monthly to-do list, I've also filled out a weekly to-do list. This I use literally every week in my own work life, and it has categories for people to email, people to call, students to assess. I use this box a lot. Meetings to prepare for, to remember. Things you need to prep. In this case, I wrote hall bulletin board. Things you need to draft, and things you need to follow up with the next week. So this is actually one of my favorite forms. The next form is just to plan fact fluency and number sense. I use this a lot more when I taught students in small groups. And the idea is that you think about each day that you work with each group. You might even have different groups on different days, and you can totally just write that in, like here. Fourth, like A group or whatever. And you might be working on subtraction. You're going to play pig, and you want to assess Liz and Julie. And again, in addition to having things in every day that you could number talks and games and assessments, you also have materials, skills, students, and groups down here. This is a page for small group observations. You, again, like with the other class at a glance form, you can type in a student's name or you can handwrite it. And I like to just jot a bunch of just notes about students. If you have fewer students, obviously you can use 2 boxes per student, or you can observe up to 8 kids on a sheet. So this next one is kind of intense, but I decided to just write down everything I need to look for when I assess reading fluency and comprehension and decoding. So I basically made a huge sort of checklist for myself of all the things. So it has things like words per minute, quality of the reading, if they track with the finger, if they omit words, just a bunch of stuff around reading fluency, along with a section on comprehension and a section on decoding, some follow-up here, some miscues here, and kind of a box here to remind myself to look at fluency, comprehension, decoding, accuracy, and reading level. This is like really helpful if you are sort of newer to reading comprehension or reading assessment. This one is if you kind of are an older candidate and you want to just jot down your thoughts without any of those checklists. And there's a place at the bottom to summarize. Finally, we have a similar kind of observation for math. And in the corner, it just says to look for what you might look for: number, sentence, fact, fluency, word problems, accuracy, and mindset. And here I have follow-up assessment. So I know that somewhere in your teaching life, you probably have a sheet of paper that says subtraction and then like 5 kids' names, or some other math skill and 5 kids' names, or some other skill and 5 kids' names. Well, this helps you organize things, like especially after a test. So you might write Unit 3, I wrote 2, Unit 3 test, right? And think about which kids need to be retaught, which kids need review, and which kids could probably use some expansion or going forward. So this is just a way to like look at an assessment and then organize the students in kind of the next steps after that assessment. And finally, and this is again one of my favorite things, is it's a very structured student meeting planner, and this is what I fill out before I meet with students and students' parents, or I have meetings about students, like SAT meetings. And basically what I do is I go through students' strengths, and here are some suggestions to think about strengths. beyond academics, so participation, motivation, depth of thinking, creativity, emotional intelligence. That's not all of them, but just some ideas here on what you might focus on when you prepare for a parent-teacher conference or a student meeting. I try to make sure when I meet with parents especially that I start with strengths, and I start by showing parents that I really know and understand their kids, because especially if you haven't met with parents before, they need to know you know their kids before you tell them about their kids' challenges. So I always start with strengths and move on to maybe some challenges, some example of student work, some goals, and then the follow-up is really what I like to do in the meeting itself to think about where I want to follow up after we've talked. So these are the forms for busy teachers, and I hope that you check it out. It's in my Teachers Pay Teacher store, and I put a link in the description.